Hello, everyone. I'm John Coleman from Apocrypha Stacy's, an Institute for the Humanities, an alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. This recording is our latest installment of A Conversation today with Levi Pingleton. Welcome, Levi.
Hello, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Levi and I are going to talk about his writing and look at Hildegard and cosmology and all sorts of good
Yes.
things. Before we get into our topic and we get to know Levi a little bit first, just one announcement concerning Apocrypha Stacy's Institute. And that is to check out our publication work. We have a lot of things coming down the pike. My own stuff, fair enough, but also reprints of classics that have fallen out, especially educational classics that we have coming up. Intellectual stuff like The Great Conversation, which is an essay from the 1940s, which deserves to be recovered. We're going to print that. We have child-rearing books coming, and also long-awaited, our course catalog. Of course, we have the courses listed on the site, but now we have a proper catalog being put together, and that will very shortly be available for download and in hard copy. So that's Apocrypha Stacy's Press, and you can find out about that on our website. With that being seen, Levi, welcome indeed. And tell us a bit about yourself. Where are you and some of your interests, and we'll go from there.
All right, excellent. Yeah, I'm Levi Pingleton. I'm originally from Indiana, but I moved here to Missouri in 2011. And basically, I'm a freelance writer. I've been writing for a long time, but I've only just recently, in the winter of 2023, started putting out public writings and trying to get my work out there and hopefully get some of my work published and hopefully get some really good collaborations going with some other guys that are writing and doing good work. Basically, the way that I even got started doing this, honestly, is my interest in writing came when I first went to Bible college while I was in a treatment center for drug addiction. And I went there, I started going to college there in 2014, and I was a Protestant. And I would argue with my my professors and teachers about Calvinism versus Arminianism and all that. So, yeah,
those are very hot topics in certain circles, you come to find.
Yeah, so I'm a convert from Protestantism.
And for the audience, is that to Islam, Buddhism, Catholic Christianity, Orthodoxy?
Catholic.
Help us out here.
I became a Roman Catholic. Yes, me and my family. I actually was Roman Catholic in faith and was attending Mass myself for about 6 years. But I prayerfully was waiting on my family to enter the church with me before I received my first Holy Communion. So we entered the church together this last Easter Vigil, and my whole family entered the church with me. So it was a really marvelous and miraculous moment in our lives. So it's just been an amazing roller coaster since then.
Wow, what a wait! Worth the wait! I'm sure.
Very much so, yes.
And in terms of your writing, Levi, would you say it's primarily on religious topics, theology, or is it a broader net, so to speak, that you cast?
I've been kind of narrowing my scope here recently to where I'm focusing more on just theology, philosophy, ancient cosmology, and Christocentric exemplarism, which is it's a philosophical and theological school of Saint Maximus the Confessor, and he's kind of the founder of that school. And it's not a well-known school, especially in the Western Church. So I'm trying to get that out in front of everyone and hopefully get it popularized and respected within the realm of modern popular piety and spirituality, and also to get people to rightly understand what it is that we believe as far as sacred cosmology goes, and why we believe it, and the importance of our doctrines and their coherence with one another and their orthodoxy within Catholicism.
Sacred cosmology. I mean, I thought Newton settled all of this stuff way back when. We're in a mechanical universe, and
Right.
we're spinning around the sun and all this. Are you saying there's more to this than Mr. Newton lets on?
Yes, and I would say also that Newton and Einstein, Copernicus, all of them in their own writings hinted and outright just admitted that it was quite irrefutable that there was a geocentric cosmology that was viable within even their systems of their scientific thought.
For our audience, for myself, why should this matter? What's the I guess prescience of geocentrism, and if you can lay this out for us.
Yeah.
Many of us were trained to snicker at such things, so
Yes.
yes.
So to lay it out, the main importance, as far as I'm concerned, and what my main goal is as far as geocentrism, because geocentrism isn't really my main goal. It's one of my first goals, and the only reason that it is one of my first goals is because it's intricately and intimately related to a beautiful doctrinal system that comes from the Franciscan school and Blessed John Duns Scotus, and it's also a beautiful spirituality that is founded within most, and I would say actually all of the early church fathers.
Mm. And would you say that geocentrism is more, in terms of a real nerve topic, is it more important to establish this than where a lot of people's scientific critique has been for probably the past century on evolution and creation? Which is more foundational in terms of getting straight first? Obviously, both of them need to be addressed, and many other points besides. But would you say that geocentrism is even more foundational than the evolution discussion?
I would say it varies on the mindset that is seeking the information. If somebody's seeking it, spiritual and theological truth, I would say that geocentrism is very important to the theological system of what's called the absolute primacy of Jesus Christ. And basically, what that doctrine entails is that there's an absolute immutable predestination of the incarnation. And within that makes it pretty clear that the earth is centrally important, because no matter what, the incarnation was happening, and the incarnation being central to the divine logos and his purpose for even creating anything, it would mean that I would say that the earth would probably be the most central, special, and unique place in the entire universe that he created.
Dare I ask, if we're in the neighborhood, and we've had all sorts on this series, so there's no right or wrong answer, but dare I ask your thoughts on the flat Earth versus the globe Earth? And I'm very sympathetic to the flat Earth, I'll be honest with you. So there's no no gotcha here or anything of that sort. How do you see that playing a role?
Well, and I greatly appreciate how you're handling this conversation and your fairness and open-mindedness. I really appreciate that, because a lot of times it just comes like straight attack, So, but flat Earth, in my opinion, flat Earth is flat wrong, and I agree with Dr. Sungenis's basic outline and his theses is that the flat Earth theory is just flat wrong, and really, the church has never purported that position, and we've never ever. I don't see anything that I've studied or researched that really supports that theory very well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's a tremendous amount. It's like with a lot of things. You find out that certain things are wrong with what we've been told, and then often there's an overcorrection. And myself being open to it,
put a disclaimer.
Go on.
I'm open to the flat Earth position. I have not studied this position. I've studied geocentrism for literally the last 6 years. And amongst other things, studying the church fathers and Christocentric spirituality has kind of been my main thing and what I've really been focusing on. So flat Earth I don't have enough information, to be honest with you. I'm not an expert on it, and I don't even claim to have a whole lot of apologetics against it or for it. So
Yeah, well, no, I'm of the same tone of voice too. I'm
Totally
open to
open.
it, but I haven't jumped into it. What's interesting though is oftentimes whether it's geocentrism or evolution or flat Earth, often the people who hold the mainline teachings on these are the ones who are the doctrinaire ones, and they will not truck any opposition.
And you're
It's
right.
oddly enough, it's us kooks, right?
Yeah.
It's us kooks that are more tolerant and more willing to give a hearing to things.
Well, and in the actual intellectual world, if you ask people about, who really is making the innovations in discoveries within physics, within science, within modern cosmology, and they'll tell you that people are so, in the establishment, are so just afraid to publish anything against the grain. And most of your publishers there will not publish anything from a geocentrist.
Hmm.
So it's kind of us guys out here on our own, really able to do this kind of research and really be able to kind of find innovating scientific research that can possibly debunk what we've kind of been force fed and what I believe has led to a real societal atheism within
Mm.
our culture. And recently, I do see that our culture is opening up to a much more traditional outlook because they can see the beauty in contrast to the ugliness that we see in our society today.
Hmm. Yes, I mean there is. I've often thought about that, especially when I teach Dante, who isn't making scientific claims
Oh, it's
necessarily,
my
but
favorite.
is it now? Yes, yes.
I love Dante.
Um, he his idea of the cosmos is shall we say a much warmer thing, and not just spiritually, just the way he lays it out. And I often, when I teach
Yes,
the commedia, contrast that to this cold freezing outer space, or just a giant marble flying around at 500,000 miles an hour. And I mean what we're given by this mechanical secular modern science
right.
is indeed a very stark and lonely thing, and that does affect how you see yourself on this earth.
Oh, yeah. The mindset is, that we're just an insignificant speck, that there's nothing special about us, that there are probably way more cooler and better beings out there than us that are much smarter than us. And also that basically, if there is a God, he doesn't really give two squats about us. And, that really does a detrimental thing to the mind and spiritual wellness of a human being. Anthropology is just completely, utterly destroyed by the evolutionary theory.
Now, you mentioned Robert Sugenis. He
Yes.
reminds me. I haven't heard that name since my traditional Catholic days, which wrapped up a few
Yeah.
years back. Is that how you came across geocentrism, through Robert Sugenis, who has done a great deal of work in that department, or was it through other channels?
Well, be honest with you, being raised as a Protestant, when I was very first, getting into Christianity, I was born into a Baptist family, a very strong Baptist family, and really traditional Baptist group of people. And then later on, was introduced to Methodists, and ended up, my mom ended up taking us to the Methodist church, and then I've kind of just gradually gone all over Protestant world. So geocentrism was introduced to me a very long time ago, and it's always kind of sparked my interest and has always kind of been pretty viable in my mind.
Hmm. So you didn't have the type of well poisoning that I would imagine much of the general public gets, either from their schooling or their secular schooling, or their media, or a combination of both. You didn't have that well poisoning.
Well, I had it, for a little while as I was, living active in addiction, and I had totally walked away from anything about the Lord for a very long time in my life. I've been sober, clean, and doing really well ever since 2011. I've been in recovery, and obviously that life's long gone. But during that period of time, oh, I absolutely was fully immersed into the secular worldview and lived a totally liberal lifestyle.
Hmm. I see. I see. Now, you mentioned the church fathers, and especially for Americans and kind of a low church vibe that we have. Can you explain to us the church fathers, and we'll
Yeah.
go from there as regards geocentrism? Who are we talking
So,
about? These what are these? The fathers club at the church down the road? What are we going on about?
right. Okay. So the church fathers, who I'm referring to when I speak of the fathers of the church, are the first generations of the successors of the bishops from the original apostles, or they are just great spiritual teachers, and they were priests, or they were lay theologians of their time, who basically kind of began and were our principal founders of the dogmas that we have as Christians. And whether you're a Catholic or any kind of Christian, there's dogmas that you hold to, and most of them originated within and were their formulations were found within these early church fathers.
Great. And uh, when it comes to geocentrism, one of the things I noticed, you said this at least twice in our time together, and that is, Levi, that the church fathers are, if not unanimous on this point, at least there's a strong assumption amongst a lot of them
Yes.
of geocentrism. And that strikes me as being very similar to a point I heard made about biological evolution that I had come across, that the church fathers, they just kind of made this they had this common belief amongst them, and that this is maybe not capital T tradition in terms of doctrine in that way, but
Yeah.
there is a heft. There's a
There's a
heft.
perennial doctrine there that we really shouldn't just ignore, and that's very essential. And when you really delve deeper into it, and you kind of are open minded, and you start reading the fathers, and you start reading some material about geocentrism, you realize that because of that perennial doctrine that is present there, that those fathers were trying to keep together, that I believe was apostolic. There's a real beautiful spiritual aspect, but there's also a real coherence with our reality, with our existence in reality. And I believe that also, I don't know how familiar you are with like Aristotelian philosophical terms or anything, but logos, the logoi, and the tropoi. Basically, the logos is Christ, and the logoi is kind of the divine rationale of every single being that would come into existence, and has come into existence. The tropoi are the means or the mode which those logoi come into existence, or the ways that God interacts with creation. So you realize really quickly that, it's not just spiritual nature things that we're talking about here. We're talking about science, and we're talking about a very sacred science, and one that is very, very relative to our lived experience. And that I believe Christians today, it would really enhance not only our love for the church, our love for one another, cause tons of unity, but it also helps us to treat our world better and have a better all around ecology and anthropology.
Yes, I mean, we touched on Dante a little bit before there, and it's geocentrism and the conclusion of a creator, which come out of that, all of a sudden take this Newtonian mechanical
Yeah.
universe, and they put it into, by restoring and correcting a lot of the errors in it, it puts it into this larger drama where we're all part of it, and it does
Yes.
completely change the psychology of things.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't know. Right now, I think that basically the worldview is kind of that's most popular is very selfish and self-centered, and all about yourself, and expressing who you want to be, or whatever you want to be, whether it's a cat or a dog or a person anymore. And also, if we were to kind of flip that around and have this geocentric cosmological worldview with Christ at the center, I mean, you're looking at where you can treat your neighbors, no matter what religion or no matter what kind of differences you have, as a brother within the divine logoi of the divine logos, our Jesus Christ, our Lord. And I just think that the worldview for Christians most certainly should be geocentric, and most certainly should be without the theory of evolution in it. And I think that it's caused a whole lot of really detrimental things to happen within all of the body of Christ. And I think we can all see those things and relate to that.
Yes, and we're going to move to your article on Hildegard here and kind of nibble through it for a bit, Levi. But one of the things that strikes me as we conclude these opening words to find ourselves around this topic here, one of the things that strikes me is you need a heliocentric mechanical universe to have liberalism. I mean that in the capital
You're
L,
right.
18th century.
Man, I'm so glad you said that. What a profound statement. What a profound statement.
Right? Because how do you end up with wanting to be a dog or a volcano or whatever you wish to identify with today, which is the logical conclusion of the 18th century atomized citizen.
That's the central point.
Yes. And you need to have this completely isolated, autonomous universe from God, if God exists at all. It's just a machine. Go on.
I said, or multiverse, as they like to, they like to get out of, actually having a solid universe with, bounds. They try to say that now there's, this multiverse and this malleable universe, and their science is always constantly evolving, as they like to, no pun intended, right?
Yes. And so there is that direct connect to our earlier points for the audience. There is that direct connect between the way our environment is presented to us.
Absolutely.
And how we perceive things. And that affects governmental systems. That certainly affects economical systems and whatnot.
Well, and is Christ present in his reality, loving and caring and nurturing and continually giving us nourishment here on earth? Or is he some, uber transcendent overlord that's arbitrary, who doesn't care about us and is throwing stones at us every day? I find the first option to be pretty well what our existence in reality is correlated to.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to go back into time here. We're going to go back into a time when everything wasn't isolated. Going back to liberalism, that's one of the definitive features of liberalism. That's a capital L. I'm not talking about what we call that politically now for the audience, right. But this amputation of different sciences, hermetically sealed. That's the word I wanted. All of the sciences we have are hermetically sealed. No one speaks to another. Look at how we teach in schools, whether that's homeschool or public school.
They have their dogmas, and they're very, very rigid about their dogmas.
Yes, and they're also rigid in the separation of them, of the
very much so
of the subject matter. So to the school point I was making there, you're going to study math for this period, and now we're going to study gym, and now we're going to study home ec, and maybe we'll be homeschoolers and we'll have theology, but they're all sciences that are not speaking to each other. That's capital L liberalism.
Yes, and that point right there, you think about modern cosmology, you think about astronomy and physics and all of these, and mathematics, all of them that have these different theories. I mean, Newton contradicts Einstein, Einstein contradicts Copernicus. They all contradict each other, and it's not like Christianity, where all of our system all flows together, and if you lose one, they all crumble.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it just kind of gives a glimpse to the real weakness of their systematic abilities to correlate to actually give expression to any kind of reality that they're trying to teach. I don't think it correlates to reality very well. Modern science, what people consider popularized modern science. It's just seems really, really kind of all over the place.
It does, however, correlate to having completely isolated consumers for a population that are very easy to control. Once once
Yes.
you factor that aspect into why all of this is being taught us, then it all makes sense. It does not correspond to reality, but it does correspond to certain schemes, let's say.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
So indeed, we're going to go back in time now with Levi, and we're going to go back to a time where every subject in science wasn't amputated and separated, but was part of an integral whole. One of the things which classifies the classical world, and especially the medieval world, for the audience, is the integration of reality of all the different subjects. It's true in the Christian Mediterranean in Western Europe, but it's just as true in other traditions and cultures as well. That's one of the definitive aspects, is this integration of reality, this synoptical viewing of reality.
Yeah, I call it the panoramic view. They give the panoramic view.
Yes, I like that. I like that. So first of all, Levi, can you tell us who Saint Hildegard was and
Yeah.
her times, let's say?
Well, Saint Hildegard von Bingen was a German mystic, and she was alive around the 11th century and 10th century, I believe. I know in my article it says there, I'm fumbling on the dates, but she was a medieval mystic, and she was just very recently by Pope Benedict XVI given the honorary title of as Doctor of the Church, which has popularized her writings pretty well. But she's not really gotten that popular, and I decided, after reading her Stivius and a few other just kind of different editorials that I had read about her, that I wanted to highlight her beautiful mystical visions of her cosmic reality that she was trying to share, and that I believe God revealed a whole lot of very amazing things that she can really give us a glimpse into that cosmic reality that we do live in, that is Christocentric.
Great, thank you for that. We have a great illustration here of herself. You see in the middle with the Holy Spirit coming down in tongues of fire, herself writing. Okay, excellent. And you begin, Levi, with this quote here, and maybe we can dig into this. Actually, I've been jabbering on enough. Would you be able to read that quote there? Thus,
absolutely, yes. Thus, the firmament is like a human head. The sun, moon, and stars are the eyes. The air is our sense of hearing. The winds, our sense of smell. The dew, our taste. The sides of the cosmos are like our arms and our sense of touch. And the other creatures that are in the world are like our stomach. But the earth is our heart. From St. Hildegard von Bingen.
Excellent.
And I believe that that's just such a beautiful quote. And that goes right back to what I was discussing with you just a few minutes ago, where we were talking about how worldview really has done a lot of destruction to the human soul and to the human introspect, as far as how we look at ourselves and our dignity, and our brothers and sisters and their dignity. And the geocentric worldview, which is what I kind of call it, basically kind of tells us a different story than what modern science tells us. It tells us that, we're all connected, and that all of this creation is very much like us, and that we're very much like it, and that we're a microcosm.
Yes, and there was a time, especially I would say before the Reformation, when you only had 4 doctors of the church, and then the Reformation, it's made 8, and they're the Eastern doctors added. But there was a time, neither here nor there, where during the feast of a doctor of the church, the common of apostles would be you would take for the mass in the office of the day. And so a doctor of the church, there's a heft to what they say. Their authority, this is that old liturgical practice, was the church's way of saying, the authority is not inspired from a doctor of the church, but it really needs to get your attention, as if almost an apostle were speaking.
Very much so. And when even within Catholicism, the magisterium, whenever they were formulating dogmas, it was essential and a principle that they were to gain those definitions that they were writing from the formulations of those fathers who formulated those doctrines in their original forms.
And I happen to be reviewing on the exercise bike in the morning Dr. Scott Hahn's well-known book, The Lamb's
Oh, he's
Supper.
excellent. Yes, what a wonderful book. Yes.
And in the last stretch of that book, he has some real zingers. And one of the things I read this very morning, Levi, and I did not plan it this way, but he
Yes.
came across, I came across rather, his point, Dr. Hahn's point, that the priest in persona Christi saying the words of institution on the altar of the altar
Yes.
and with the bread and the wine, what the priest is doing there is exactly, to Hildegard's point here, is exactly what the Logos does to creation. This is my
Very much
body.
so. Yes, and that's where the logoi and the tropoi that I was speaking of earlier, those philosophical concepts really give a life and just a breath of fresh air to the liturgical experience.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we find out that Hildegard von Bingen was a truly outstanding figure in the medieval theology, mysticism, and natural science. I mean, right there. Look
Yes.
at that. Look at our liberal capital L distortion. We would say that's like a chalk and cheese. What does theology, mysticism, and natural science have to do?
Right.
And yes, and yet this one sees it as one symphonic whole.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the beauty of Saint Hildegard, and really the beauty of all of the church fathers is when you go back and read them, where they're in when they're in consensus, it is on these very things. It's on these very Christocentric and philosophical points, and they all had a very, very central, special, and unique place for the earth in their worldviews, and that came from the apostles and from Jesus Christ, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And if you do believe that that integration, we say, of all creation with the Logos, getting back to our earlier point of how that affects how you look at the world and how you act, if you don't have that, you have, I think, that the culture that we live in and have been certainly for a century or more, you have a culture of cynicism. If you believe that your neighbor is just some accident of biology and you're on this spinning marble, et cetera, in a cold, freezing universe, that allows for this type of cynicism. I can give a whole laundry list, and you can give me another one back, Levi, of all the social
Yes.
institutions and behaviors that we engage in and are encouraged to engage in. Starting with the damn liquor store that opens up here in Connecticut at 8 o'clock in the morning. You're right. You wouldn't do that
Yes.
unless you saw the next door person as a cow that you could just intoxicate and take their money.
Well, in our American society, especially here, it's like used to, we weren't into killing one another. We weren't into destroying each other. We had a very wholesome and modest culture, and we uplifted one another. And we, I understand there was problems and we had, racial issues and different things that, yes, we've overcome and have made great strides, of progress for. But, it wasn't the progressive ideology that's done that. The progressive ideology was actually what's, still continuing today to keep racism even in our culture.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And there's that separation of again, people groups.
Just cynicism, like you said. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So Hildegard lived in a period when the geocentric model, which posits that the Earth is the center of the universe, was already wisely and widely accepted. Unlike today, though geocentrism is becoming more accepted due to its amazing congruency with modern physics and astronomical data and the revelations about so-called conspiracy theories, a CIA term, by the way, about its discriminatory and unjust suppression being found factually true.
Yeah, and that right there, that's a big statement and says a whole lot. So let's unpack that just a little bit.
Yes.
So obviously we live in a Copernican society who is pretty well fully embraced the heliocentric model and holds it to be factual, even though there's many arguments against that. And actually, in fact, even modern physicists and astronomers and scientists of all kinds of different fields will tell you that the geocentric system is viable, that it is irrefutable, that basically heliocentrism is not provable, and that it's just on the equal playing field. It just happens to be that modern physicists, who are the elites and who hold the publications in their hands and are the puppet masters, they just don't like the fact that if a geocentric system was to be promoted or given to any kind of a popular audience, that basically that would give more plausibility to the theistic worldview and that there is a creator. And they don't want that they want science to say a different thing. They don't want a science that says that, there is a creator. And if the universe has a central earth, then somebody must have put it there. And they are very intimidated by that, and they're very afraid of that. And I have shown in numerous of my articles and in different places where even Einstein and other very, very popular modern scientists within the last couple hundred years have said, basically the same thing.
And I wonder if you could speak to this, Levi. I have some familiarity with what I'm setting up for when it comes to evolution, and I have a little bit in the realm of flat Earth, of which I'm more tentative than my conclusions about evolution as it's presented to us being false. Getting into the micro and the macro and all that. But what am I building up to? And I'd like you to speak to it if you know it. I'm aware in evolution and with the way the Earth is presented as round, that there is a lot of assumptions that have to come into in the mainstream science when they say that man evolved from single cell organism that like lightning struck and all this jazz. If you actually get into the data, you don't have to dig that deep. There's a certain honesty that the better of the natural scientists these days have, where they'll admit like they're making an assumption. In order to get the theory to work, they have to make an assumption.
They're theorizing and doing exactly, very similar to what anybody would do when they don't really know the truth. They're kind of trying to formulate their best guess, and they're philosophizing, which is a beautiful term that's hard to say. They're philosophizing just like anyone else would, but they're posing those philosophized notions as fact, and they're not facts. Mm-hmm. They're hypotheses. They're not facts, and people need to know that.
Yes. And that philosophized word does make you work for it, doesn't it?
I know. I just got so tongue-tied.
I'm that same way with parasitism, the parasitism.
Yes. Well, and when you got a Southern drawl like I do, I'm telling you, you can't say a scientific term without sounding stupid.
How funny! But even there, with this philosophizing that goes on, we're seeing at the very least, this what you're saying with this theocentric model of creation and the logos and so forth, that is no more egregious than what the natural secular scientists are doing. They're taking. Go on.
It's like you were saying. It's no more ridiculous than their theories. Mm-hmm. To them. I mean, they talk about how theology and spiritual, mystical, philosophy is just so ridiculous. Well, it's no more ridiculous than they're theorizing and philosophizing in their own works. It's called science, and sometimes you have to use your best reason in order to make your best assumptions that you can, but you don't pose them as being facts. You're honest, and you tell your audience that these are hypotheses and they seem to make sense to me, but you make your conclusion based on your best efforts.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are we looking at here, Levi? What is this beautiful drawing cartoon we're looking at?
It is a image that it's said that Saint Hildegard had by her own hand. And I believe actually this is like a quilt, if I remember correctly. Some kind of something with more like sewing and knitting and things involved with it. but it basically is a picture of her vision that she was given in these visions by Jesus Christ himself of the geocentric cosmological hierarchical structure. And this structure is called in her writings the cosmic egg.
Wow. Very daunting, I must say. Very daunting.
Oh, it is. And it's just so beautiful. And yeah, there's a lot there that you could really, really read and get in. Man, it's just beautiful.
So are these like cherubim and things, these little dudes here on the 3 o'clock,
Yep.
6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock?
Yes. And all of those kind of star looking things, those are
Yeah.
angels.
Uh-huh.
Those are not
Okay.
those are not just your, the little ones are stars and cosmological or the celestial bodies, but the big stars, those are the angels.
Aha. Okay. All right.
Yes.
We'll move on here. But what are these things that look like piles of rocks with carrots growing out of them?
Those I believe is like
black background.
those I believe are also like maybe man, I cannot remember, to be honest with you.
That's okay. It's
Yeah,
symbolic. So
I'm
there
trying
you
to
go.
think, but I'm not really sure off the top of my head right now.
Good. Our audience can do some homework and get back to
Well, and really, there's
us.
a whole lot of there's a whole lot of interpretation there that's really for the person who's viewing. That she didn't put a whole lot of super detailed things in there to where the imagination couldn't be used.
And she writes that after these things in this vision, this is Hildegard, I saw a huge form, rounded and shadowy and shaped like an egg. It was pointed at the top, wide in the middle, and narrower at the bottom. Its outer layer consisted of an atmosphere of bright fire with a kind of dark membrane beneath it. And in that outer atmosphere, there was a ball of red fire so large that all the huge form was lit up by it. Directly above the fireball was a vertical row of 3 lights, which held it with their fire and the energy and prevented it from falling. At times, the fireball rose upwards and was met by more fire, which caused it to shoot out in great long flames. And she goes on here, but what detail and what a treasure!
Oh
I mean,
man,
speaking
yes, and
as
it's
a
a long
historian, what a
article,
treasure!
and
This vision preserved for so many centuries.
yeah, and it's a long article, and I did not. I've actually gotten a lot of views and a lot of people that are reading this right now, and it actually helped me get associated with Hugh Owen. Be honest with you, and it's just been a blessing to me that people have resonated with her beautiful mystical visions, because my voice is pretty boring, and for me to sit there and read it to you is not the funnest thing to do. But her visions are so beautiful that, I mean, you could say them in the most monotone voice, and as long as you're getting the picture well rounded in your mind, you're going to have an incredible mystical and spiritual experience as you read her writings.
And then there's a long explanation here of the different, a continuing explanation of the different parts of this cosmic egg. And
That's
now what do
another
we see?
beautiful thing about her
Yes, yes.
writing. She always goes in and explains her visions and gives the analysis of what God was showing her according to what her insight was.
Excellent. And here we have another illustration. I think it's making this point of this integration. So we have Hildegard there in the corner, it looks like, dutifully recording things.
Yes.
But we have in the macrocosm the same reflection in the microcosm, just like as I quoted Dr. Hahn, the priest says the words, "This is my body," over the elements on the altar. This is exactly what Christ does with the universe. This is my body.
Yes.
And there's this transformation that happens. So we looked at this cosmic egg, and now we have this fella here. What's going on?
Yes.
What are you looking at?
Well, honestly, that is kind of an anthropological, cosmic, spherical, iconographic image that Saint Hildegard, she is said to have made an image very similar to this. I don't know if this is a replication or one of the actual images that they do have, but this image here is supposed to represent kind of the anthropology that she was given through her visions, where man and the earth are central to the creation and the divine logos and the logoi and tropoi of that logos.
Excellent. We see the sea creatures, we see the different birds and so forth.
Yeah, it's basically a representation of what was going on as far as in the divine mind before the creation, what was in the divine mind for creation.
We have here the nous pervaded by the Godhead and embracing both
Yes.
the macro, big, and microcosm from this manuscript here.
Yeah.
Can you explain that word for us? The nous, is that synonymous with logos and order, or is that there's a distinction there?
You know what? We're all going to have to look that one up because, to be honest with you, I am not sure. Yep. I thought it was a very interesting title as well. And I'm sure it's probably not complicated. It's probably just as simple as getting a translation real quick and probably figure it out.
Yeah, tentatively, I believe nous is synonymous with logos. I've heard a lot of Eastern Orthodox use that term. I think it's a Greek term.
Yeah,
But so
kind of like
logos,
I kind of thought it was kind of referring to logos, but also kind of with the holy name as well, kind of an integration of both.
Indeed. So we'll
That
follow up
image
on
there
that.
is kind of similar. Yep.
This one here, you say?
Oh, the one up there. Yeah, that's kind of similar to the anthropology, except for that's more of the cosmology.
Mm-hmm. You see the angels on the far extreme of this. This
Yes, and
layout
I
here.
love how the interplay between the angels. That's something that we've lost from the great medieval scholastics and from all of the great fathers of our traditions. Is that just beautiful? Sorry, I'm losing train of thought. That beautiful, that beautiful understanding of those things. I apologize. I lost my train of thought there.
No, not
I've
at
got
all.
I got my daughter rolling dough on the floor here.
There you go. You got to keep your head on a swivel. That's for sure. But here we have
Oh
some
yeah,
more.
she's been right here by my side, so trying to keep my head and her together.
Yes, yes. And here we see some similar illustrations. But yeah, that whole angelic realm is
Okay, yeah,
largely
see, that's what I was wanting to
just
finish. Thank you for saying that. We've lost that aspect of the angels and their interaction within our reality and existence. We really do. When you look into the beautiful spirituality of people like Saint Hildegard, you see that the angels were a very important aspect of their spiritual lives, and that they really saw the angelic act in all of their reality around them. In all of creation, they just saw the angels acting and doing God's will within creation, and that just brings a beautiful aspect of the divine relationship with us into our hearts, that we can really just I don't know how you can't grow spiritually from learning about these things.
And it would seem to me, to your points right now, Levi, it would seem to me that this idea of geocentrism, uh, as well as evolution and tentatively flat Earth stuff, this
Yes.
would be a very good on ramp, I think, in these United States for most Christians to indeed grow spiritually. So, where am I
Yes,
coming from
very
with
much
this?
so.
American Christianity of whatever flavor you please, Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, whatever, Nestorian, whatever.
Right.
It's extremely didactic. It's extremely preachy. It's
Yes.
extremely intellectual, or at least the better parts of it are intellectual. It's certainly ideas, though. I mean, that's one of the problems since the Reformation, and certainly since the secular onslaught. Christianity has largely, for most people, become a compilation of ideas that are held.
Yeah, and it's like there's no people just don't have the resolve that they used to for the faith. They're so open-minded that there's almost kind of this syncretistic what am I looking for? Rationalistic pluralism that's kind of exists within Christianity that I think is a little bit unhealthy.
Yeah, I think that's one attempt to account for what is presented as truth, biological evolution, heliocentrism, and so forth. You have that tendency, but there's also a tendency, especially amongst people who are trying to be very devout. I find in this country, across various Christian traditions, that Christianity becomes. I think Protestants are more susceptible because in this country it's a very liturgical Protestant world. It's
Right.
just a sermon sandwich, as they say.
Yes.
But in any case, amongst those communities too, Christianity becomes just a collection of political beliefs, religious beliefs, practices, and
Right.
getting
It's
back
like a social culture club, and that's not what it should be.
exactly. And this idea of geocentrism, I think, is a very good on ramp from those sorts of individuals, all of us in this country, regardless of the so-called denomination or whatever, to get back into this more holistic and dare we say sacramental understanding of creation.
Yeah, and when you are experiencing it, and you learn things like this, and you begin to experience it through this knowledge becoming, forming in your heart, and you do start seeing it, it's hard not to start having a firmer resolve for your faith, and taking it much more seriously, and having a more solid spiritual life when you actually really believe that God really is interacting with every single thing that you do, even down to the single molecules that are existing within the ethereal realm of the matter that's just floating around here.
And it's also a good bridge as you lay this out, and the ideas are flowing as best they can in my brain. um,
Yeah.
you have the American situation for, as a general statement, Christians in this country, very kind of isolated academic intellectual Christianity.
Yes.
And then you have ideally, membership ultimately in the Catholic Church, reunion in the church, and sacramental life. I think this idea of geocentrism is an excellent bridge. Once you understand the cohesion of these ideas, great, and then you see the cohesion of these ideas and these beliefs in creation. Naturally, the human being is a liturgical. Hierarchical being that would seem to be the
Yes.
witness of history. I think this
Beautifully
idea
said.
of geocentrism is an excellent on ramp to a liturgical Christianity and a hierarchical, authoritative faith,
Very
which is
much
very
so.
different than our culture.
Yes, and like you said, I think it's a great point that you bring up, and that it's such a wonderful thing. I do believe that it's a great bridge builder, and that it has the potential to form a lot of unity, and especially within apostolic Christianity, but also with all of our separated brothers. As a Catholic, that's what I call other Christians. We have an intimate connection through the Logos, and we should all be united. And I do believe that geocentrism is a really, really big key to uniting Christendom.
So, Levi, I'm going to, of course, for the audience, link this article and the bubble with your Substack, your
Yes.
largest Substack there.
Thank you so
Where do you
much.
see? Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely. But before we knock off, where do you see your research and your writing on this topic and other topics? Where do you see that developing in the time ahead?
Yes, well, right now in the immediate future, what I'm working on, and I'm going to be putting out some articles this week, hopefully at least one, but maybe possibly two or three. And it's going to be going through the Mystagogia of Saint Maximus the Confessor. And what I'm wanting to do is go through the Mystagogia word for word with my audience, and we're going to learn from Saint Maximus the Confessor more about the Christocentric cosmology and theology. And I'm going to do some commentary on there as we go through, and try to be a little interactive with my audience as I go and do these things. But I think that St. Maximus the Confessor is the best place to start as far as trying to really delve into a systematic Christological, Christocentric worldview that really is going to be a powerful theological impact on the whole entire church, I believe, if we can get it on a popular level. Something that you were talking about earlier that really had hit my heart. You were talking about how the intellectual kind of world of Christianity isn't really, connected and appealing to the more popular level, and maybe a little bit more of the watered down sphere. And that's exactly what I'm doing with Dr. Sungenis's books, with Dr. Wolfgang Smith, with many, many others, Hugh Owen and the Kolbe Center. All of them are such wonderful experts who have already done such great scientific research and put out so many great publications. And so I want to take those that no one basically, on the popular level will ever read. And I'm wanting to popularize those and put them in bite-sized nuggets to where people can actually eat them and hopefully feed off of them. And we can get this Christocentric cosmology and this beautiful, just amazing spirituality in front of people who are just everyday people like me. I'm at home right now with my kid doing this, and that's kind of what I do now for the most part. And I'm not some big wigged intellectual. I'm somebody who's read a lot of works that were from other big-wigged intellectuals, and I want to present these in a popular way to where people can feed off of these beautiful ideas and this rich theology and spirituality that the fathers bring to us.
Before we set down the bird here and with final words, something that strikes me as a parallel in our time and the last century and the 19th century. And the parallel I'm noticing is in the 19th century, you had the rise of higher criticism in biblical scholarship. And the reaction to that, now the church has accepted some of that, but at the time, the church, and also I would say the Protestant groups too, the reaction people had in higher criticism biblically made a lot of people very uncomfortable. And there were two responses to it. One was and I believe both of these responses were coming, as I'm going to say with natural science in the 20th century in our time, a feeling of inferiority. In the 19th century, either people leaned way too much into the higher criticism, became skeptical and that sort of thing, and then you ended up with Unitarians and all of this jazz, or they leaned as a type of solution to this, they went completely opposite into feelings and pietism and so forth. And if you just go on,
the existentialism, yes.
And both of those schools, the overly scientific, mechanical looking of Holy Scripture, and then the over sentimentalization, there's another 25-cent word, those basically became modernism in the early 20th century, this weird like inferiority response to higher criticism. And I think that's what to your last point, Levi, that's an interesting, so you have all of these alleged claims of modern secular science, and either you have the Christian who feels inferior to this knowledge and they try to make it work, they try to make natural evolution work and heliocentrism
they try to mold it into the Christian system, and it's impossible.
Yes. And I think this look, and this is my final word, and I kick it to you for the final words in yourself. I think this is really where Hildegard and that much earlier generation of people could really help us to recover this integrated symphonic understanding of life.
Very much so. I completely agree with that. And I really appreciate you having me on. And it's such a blessing to get to meet you. You are such a bright mind. And I am just, I'm just humbled before you because I just enjoyed our conversation so much. So I look forward to having another one, I hope, very soon. And I hope that everybody who's listening, that they've learned and picked up a little bit of something that gets them excited to go and read for themselves St. Hildegard von Bingen, or to look into Christocentric theology for themselves, because there's a whole lot of beautiful things to find if you do.
Great. So to the audience, thank you for your attention, and be sure to check out Levi's sites there and subscribe and donate at his Substack. And Levi, hang on here as we knock off, but thank you for your expertise.
Yes, thank you so much.